So in our next section of heredity and genetics, we're going to talk about probability, and we're going to work with Punnett squares. We worked with Punnett squares last time. At least I showed you, gave you an idea of what they look like, and we're going to look at them closely. And you're going to be able to, by the end of the class or by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to draw the Punnett squares and really know what they mean and what kind of results they can give you. So probability, we talked about it last class, it describes the possibility of something happening. So the likelihood that something happens. It doesn't tell you what will happen for sure, but it gives you an idea of what is likely to happen. Also, it's important to know that for probability, the events that happened before are not going to affect the events that are going to happen in the future. And the examples I used in class were, if a family has 6 girls, what's the probability that they'll have another girl? Well, it's 50-50. The fact that they already have 6 girls doesn't necessarily mean that they'll have a boy next or that they'll have a girl. The probability doesn't change. So the results of one event don't affect the results of others. Same things with flipping a coin. If you flip a coin, it's heads or tails. If you get heads 5 times, it doesn't mean that the 6th time that you will get heads or that you'll get tails. It's a 50-50 chance. So a Punnett square is basically something that shows us or that gives us the possibility of combinations that can result from two people crossing, from their genes crossing, a genetic cross. 2 words that you really have to remember when we're talking about heredity and when we're using Punnett squares is you have to remember the word alleles. Okay? And the word genes. A gene is basically a word that we use to talk about the parts of a DNA that control a certain trait. So we have genes that control our height. We have genes that control eye color. We have genes that control whether or not we have dimples. Genes that control whether or not a mouse will have white fur or black fur. So genes are the factors that control a trait, whereas alleles are the different forms of the gene. So if we talk about the gene for having blue eyes, then the alleles for blue eyes are represented usually by letters. So an allele for the gene could be the brown eyes or the blue eyes. This will make a little bit more sense in just a minute. So in a Punnett square, on one side of the square, we put the male parents' alleles, and on the other side of the square, we put the female parents' alleles. So let's talk about the example I used in class is eye color. So you're told that blue eyes is the alleles for all traits are represented by capital letters and small letters. Now in this example, we're going to create a Punnett square for pea plant seed shape. Pea plant seed shape. And by the information we're given, we're told that the round, so having a round pea plant seed is dominant, and a wrinkled seed is recessive. And I'm just going to use any example. So I'm going to say that the female allele, the female's alleles are one dominant and one recessive allele. And the male, let's say, was a wrinkled. So we have a wrinkled plant. And here we have a round-shaped seed plant. Okay. Now, what this Punnett square is going to give us is the probability. So what are the chances of having offspring with a certain seed shape? So if we cross, there's that possibility and these possibilities. So what this is telling us is that if the male contributed his dominant allele, the female contributed her dominant allele, and the male his recessive, then we'd have big R, small r. are small r smaller, big R smaller, small r smaller. So here then we can look at the possibilities. What are the chances of having a pea plant with round seeds? Well, we have 2 out of 4, which is 50%. What are the chances of having a pea plant with a round C-shaped? Well, we have, again, 2 out of 4, so we have 50% chance. I'm going to use this Punnett square, but for a second I just want you to ignore this information here. We're going to look at something more related to us, so we'll look at eye color. So if I tell you that brown eyes are dominant and blue eyes are recessive, and it's going to be represented by big B, small b, okay? So if we have big B, that means the person has brown eyes. If we have big B, it still means they have brown eyes. And they have small b, it means they have blue eyes. So this is what these alleles mean, or this combination of alleles. So let's say we had a mother who had brown eyes and a father who had blue eyes. So these are his sperm cells. And this is the female. Okay, so let's say she contributed the allele for brown eyes, the dominant allele, and he contributed his blue-eyed allele. These are our possibilities. So what does this mean? So if I tell you what are the chances that they're going to have a baby with blue eyes, you look like, well, there's here 1, 2 out of 4. So there's a 50% chance that they're going to have a baby with blue eyes. And there's a 50% chance that they're going to have a baby with brown eyes. What you really need to remember from the Punnett squares is that you have to remember that each parent will contribute 1 allele. Because remember, egg cells and sperm cells each have half the number of chromosomes. So they're each going to contribute 1 allele. And everything is by chance. They can contribute 1 just as much as they can contribute the other. I'm going to skip over a few slides and really focus on some words that I need you to remember. So here we have the alleles for a particular flower color. Okay. Now, when we talk about phenotype, this is the first word that's really important. The phenotype is the organism's physical appearance, or the traits that we see. So if we look at this flower and we say, well, what's its phenotype? The phenotype is purple, because this is the trait that we see. We see the color. Whereas genotype, I'll do that in a different color. Genotype is its genetic makeup. What are the combination of alleles? So if we look at this plant and we say, well, what's its phenotype, or its genotype? Then we say it's capital P, capital P. Let's look at the white plant. So for the white plant, right here, we say, okay, what's the white plant's phenotype? We say, well, it's white. And what is its genotype? Well, we say that it's small p, small p. So it's got 2 recessive alleles. The next 2 words that I really need you to remember are, heterozygous and homozygous. You can't really see it here. Heterozygous means when you have 2 different alleles for the same gene. So here we've got capital P, small p, we say that's heterozygous. And here we've got 2 big P's or 2 capital P's, we say it's homozygous. Similarly here, we have 2 small p's, we call it homozygous. So you'll hear the expression, this flower is heterozygous purple. So you'll know that it's purple, but it's heterozygous, which means it's not going to be capital P, capital P. No. Heterozygous will mean that it'll have 1 of each allele. Similarly, if you hear them say the flower is homozygous white, then you'll know that it's white. And because you've been told that it's homozygous, you'll know that it'll have 2 of the same alleles. So small p, small p.